Rita's voice stung like a slap. "You're just an overpaid babysitter for test tubes," she sneered in the lab hallway. I clutched my clipboard, her words burning as her face twisted with the same contempt she'd shown me for months. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting stark shadows on Bright Hall Medical Center's sterile walls in Memphis, Tennessee. "I'm Janet Morrison, 57, and I've poured my life into laboratory medicine. For 12 years, I've been the certified laboratory director at Bright Hall, running the diagnostics that keep this clinic alive." Rita, my supervisor, doesn't get it. To her, I'm just a signature on paperwork, not the backbone of this operation. "Rita," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the knot in my gut, "federal regulations require my certifications for this lab to stay legal. Without me, we can't run a single test." She rolled her eyes, waving her manicured hand. "Please, Janet. Any technician could do your job. You act like you're irreplaceable." Her words hit hard. 6 months ago, Rita arrived from corporate with her shiny MBA and zero clue about lab regulations. To her, my $120,000 salary is just a number to cut. "The clinical laboratory improvement amendments demand my specific credentials," I tried again. "If I go, the lab shuts down until you find someone with my qualifications." She laughed, sharp and cold. "You're so dramatic. Dr. Coleman's back next week. She'll love my cost-saving plan." Leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, Rita looked smug, like she'd already spent the money she thought she'd save. "Your time's running out, Janet," she warned. A chill ran through me. As I walked past the humming centrifuges and analyzers processing patient samples, I knew this wasn't just about her making my life miserable. She was plotting something bigger, questioning my work, undermining me with the staff. This was only the start. Bright Hall means more to me than most know. When I started here 12 years ago, the lab was a mess: failed inspections, temporary directors, and constant violations. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the clinic's owner, recruited me from Kelwind Regional Hospital, where I'd turned their struggling lab into a success. I rebuilt Bright Hall's lab from the ground up, and I'm not letting Rita tear it down. Patricia's words during my interview still echo in my mind. "Janet, I need someone who doesn't just meet regulations but blows them out of the water," she said. "Our clinic serves Memphis's most underserved communities, and our patients rely on fast, accurate lab results. Can you make us the gold standard?" Her passion for patient care hooked me instantly. After 8 years watching corporate healthcare erode the heart of medicine, Patricia's patient-first vision was a lifeline. In just 6 months, I turned things around. We aced inspections, expanded testing, and boosted lab revenue by 40%. So, it stung when Rita, the new interim manager, wanted to cut my job. Hired while Patricia was away, Rita was all about corporate cost-cutting. The board worried about expenses, and she was their fix-it person, treating healthcare like a factory needing a trim. "These doctors act like every role is untouchable," Rita told me her first week, not realizing she was exposing her cluelessness about medicine. "In the real world, you slash costs to stay competitive." She didn't get it. My certifications weren't just fancy titles. They were federal mandates under the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments. Without a qualified lab director, we'd lose our ability to run tests, from simple blood work to complex cancer diagnostics. I tried explaining this to Rita, handing her our licensing docs and regulations. She brushed me off, accusing me of protecting my job. Worse, she didn't care about patient safety. Our lab handled 2,000 samples a week, guiding critical decisions for diabetes, cancer, and more. The idea of budget cuts derailing this made me sick. As I reviewed quality control and signed off on patient reports, I couldn't shake the fear of Rita's plans. Our patients, doctors, and Patricia's hard-earned reputation were all on the line because Rita only saw dollar signs. The final straw hit on a Tuesday morning in late October, 3 days before Patricia's return from a conference in San Diego. I walked into my office to find Rita waiting, a manila folder splayed across my desk, her smile dripping with fake sweetness. "Good morning, Janet," she said. "Hope you enjoyed your weekend. It's your last one as an employee here." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" She gestured to the papers on my desk with theatrical flair. "I've been reviewing your performance metrics, and frankly, they don't justify your inflated salary. The board has approved my recommendation to restructure the laboratory operations, and that restructuring doesn't include your position." I stared at the termination paperwork, my hands trembling as I read the effective date, today. "Rita, you cannot do this. The federal regulations explicitly require." "I've already spoken with Human Resources," she interrupted, clearly enjoying her moment of power. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out once you've gathered your personal belongings." The crushing realization hit me like a physical blow. She was actually doing it. After months of threats and intimidation, Rita was following through on her plan to eliminate my position. And she genuinely believed she could operate the laboratory without a certified director. "You don't understand," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "My certifications are directly tied to our laboratory license. When I'm terminated, the automatic revocation clause in my employment agreement triggers, and our federal certification becomes invalid immediately." Rita's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with renewed smugness. "That's just scare tactics, Janet. Any of our senior technicians can handle the paperwork while we find a cheaper replacement." "This isn't about paperwork," I said, pulling up the federal database on my computer. "Look at this. Our laboratory license number is tied to my National Credentialing Agency certification. When my employment status changes to terminated, the system automatically flags our license as non-compliant." She leaned over my shoulder, squinting at the screen. "That's just bureaucratic nonsense. We'll call them and explain the situation." "There's no explaining," I said, my voice growing stronger as I realized the magnitude of what she was about to unleash. "Federal law doesn't have exceptions for budget cuts or staffing changes. Without a qualified director, we cannot legally perform any diagnostic testing. Not blood work, not urinalysis, not molecular diagnostics, nothing." Rita's confidence was beginning to crack, but her pride prevented her from backing down. "You're being dramatic as usual. The laboratory will function just fine without you." As security arrived to escort me out, I looked back at the laboratory that had been my professional home for over a decade. The humming equipment, the dedicated staff, the thousands of patient samples that would soon have nowhere to go, all of it about to become collateral damage in Rita's misguided cost-cutting crusade. The most heartbreaking part was knowing that Patricia would return to find her life's work in ruins, destroyed by someone who had never understood what they were actually managing. The moment I stepped out of Bright Hall Medical Center for the last time, my phone began buzzing with notifications. The federal database systems were already processing my employment termination, and the automatic alerts were cascading through the regulatory network like digital dominoes falling in rapid succession. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching through the windows as Rita strutted through the laboratory, presumably explaining to the stunned staff that business would continue as usual. The irony was almost amusing if it weren't so devastating. Within hours, she would discover that confidence couldn't override federal law. My phone rang, displaying the number for Wellspring Medical Group, Bright Hall's primary competitor across town. Dr. Harrison Blake, their chief executive, was calling personally. "Janet, I just received an automated notification that your credentials have been revoked at Bright Hall," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" Harrison and I had maintained a professional relationship over the years, often collaborating on complex cases that required specialized testing capabilities. Despite being competitors, we shared a mutual respect for laboratory excellence and patient care standards. "Rita Henderson terminated my employment this morning," I explained, feeling the weight of the situation settling over me. "She believes any technician can replace me and doesn't understand the regulatory requirements." There was a long pause before Harrison spoke again. "Janet, this is catastrophic for them. Without your certifications, they can't perform any diagnostic testing." "Are you telling me Rita doesn't understand that she just shut down their entire laboratory operation?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," I replied, watching as confused technicians began gathering in the laboratory windows, probably wondering why their computer systems were displaying error messages. Harrison's next words caught me completely off guard. Janet, I've been hoping for an opportunity to expand our laboratory operations, and frankly, I've always believed you were wasted at Brightall. What would you say to joining Wellspring as our Director of Laboratory Operations? The position comes with equity participation and a significant salary increase. I felt my breath catch. Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but I just lost my job this morning. Are you sure this is the right time for such a conversation? This is exactly the right time, he said firmly. Brightall is about to lose every single laboratory patient when word gets out that they can't perform testing. Those patients will need somewhere to go, and I want Wellspring to be ready to serve them with the highest quality laboratory services available. Under your leadership, we could become the premier diagnostic center in Memphis. As we spoke, I watched Rita emerge from the building, her face no longer triumphant, but confused and increasingly panicked. She was holding her phone to her ear, presumably dealing with the first wave of system alerts and regulatory notifications. The timing is certainly interesting, I admitted, feeling a spark of something I hadn't experienced in months, hope mixed with the delicious anticipation of poetic justice. What kind of timeline are you considering? I asked. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning, Harrison said. Our board has already approved the expansion budget, and frankly, acquiring Brightall's patient base would accelerate our growth timeline by at least 2 years. The perfect symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me. Rita had eliminated my position to save money, only to hand our entire patient base to the competition along with their most qualified laboratory director. The financial impact would be devastating, not just the immediate loss of laboratory revenue, but the long-term damage to Brightall's reputation and patient relationships. Harrison, I'm very interested in discussing this opportunity, I said, watching as more Brightall staff members gathered in the parking lot, clearly dealing with some kind of crisis inside the building. When can we meet? How about this afternoon, he replied. I have a feeling your former employer is about to have a very difficult day, and I'd like to be prepared to help those displaced patients as quickly as possible. As I drove away from Brightall, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Rita's attempt to eliminate what she saw as an unnecessary expense was about to become the most costly mistake in the clinic's history. By 2 p.m. that same day, the full scope of Rita's catastrophic decision was becoming clear throughout Memphis's medical community. I was sitting in Harrison's executive conference room at Wellspring Medical Group, reviewing the generous offer package he had prepared, when his assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Blake, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're receiving calls from several physician offices asking about emergency laboratory services, she said. Apparently, Brightall Medical Center has suspended all diagnostic testing indefinitely. Harrison and I exchanged knowing glances. The news was spreading faster than we had anticipated, which meant the regulatory agencies had wasted no time in notifying healthcare providers about Brightall's non-compliance status. How many calls? Harrison asked. 17 in the past hour, she replied. And Dr. Morrison, there are several messages specifically asking for you by name. Word is getting out that you're no longer with Brightall. The validation felt bittersweet. These were physicians who trusted my work, who had relied on the quality and accuracy of our laboratory results to guide their patient care decisions. Now, they were scrambling to find alternative testing facilities because Rita had dismissed my warnings as job protection tactics. My phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Sarah Chin, one of Brightall's primary referring physicians, Janet, heard about the lab closure. Can you recommend alternative testing facilities? My diabetic patients need their monitoring results ASAP, then another from Dr. Michael Torres, what's happening at Brightall? Our morning lab orders are all being rejected by the system, and another from Dr. Rebecca Foster, Janet, please tell me this is temporary. We have cancer patients who need their staging results this week, each message reinforced the human cost of Rita's decision. These weren't just abstract regulatory violations, they were real patients with urgent medical needs who were now caught in the chaos of Rita's incompetence. Harrison, I need to accept your offer, I said, setting my phone aside. These patients can't wait for Brightall to figure out their regulatory nightmare. I was hoping you'd say that, Harrison replied, sliding the contract across the table. With your reputation and relationships, we can have these physicians transferring their laboratory orders to Wellspring by tomorrow morning. As I signed the agreement that would make me Wellspring's Director of Laboratory Operations with a 30% salary increase and equity participation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Coleman's number. She was calling from San Diego. Janet, please tell me what I'm hearing isn't true. Patricia's voice was strained with panic. I just received a call from our attorney saying we've lost our laboratory certification. What happened? Rita terminated my employment this morning, I explained calmly. I warned her repeatedly about the regulatory requirements, but she believed any technician could replace me. Oh my God, Patricia whispered. Where is she now? I need to speak with her immediately. I'm not sure, but based on the physician calls we're receiving, I suspect she's dealing with a lot of very angry doctors and confused patients. Janet, we need to fix this. Can you come back? Name your price. Whatever it takes to restore our certification. The desperation in Patricia's voice was heartbreaking, but the damage was already done. Patricia, I've already accepted a position with Wellspring Medical Group. Even if I wanted to return, the certification process would take weeks, and you'd need board approval for the salary it would require to make that worthwhile. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Patricia was beginning to understand that Rita's decision hadn't just cost them my services, it had potentially destroyed everything she had built over the past 15 years. I'm so sorry, Janet, she finally said. You deserved better than this. As I hung up, Harrison was already making calls to expand our laboratory's operating hours and bring in additional staff to handle the influx of patients we were about to receive. The next morning, I arrived at Wellspring Medical Group at 6 a.m. to find the parking lot already bustling with activity. News of Brightal's laboratory closure had spread throughout Memphis's medical community overnight, and physicians were scrambling to establish new testing relationships for their patients. Harrison met me at the entrance, his face flushed with excitement. Janet, we've received over 200 laboratory order transfers since yesterday afternoon. Our phone hasn't stopped ringing. As we walked through Wellspring's expanded laboratory facility, I could see the staff preparing for what was clearly going to be the busiest day in the clinic's history. The contrast with my last day at Brightal couldn't have been more stark. Instead of confusion and panic, there was organized efficiency and professional excitement. Dr. Morrison called out Lisa Chin, one of Wellspring's senior laboratory technicians. We're so honored to have you join our team. The physicians have been asking specifically for your oversight on their complex cases. The warmth of the welcome was overwhelming after months of Rita's hostility and disrespect. These professionals understood and valued laboratory expertise, and they were genuinely excited about the expansion opportunities my arrival represented. My phone had been buzzing constantly since sunrise with messages from physician offices, former Brightal colleagues, and even some of the more experienced technicians asking about employment opportunities at Wellspring. The exodus from Brightal was happening faster than anyone had anticipated. At 9 a.m., Harrison's assistant brought me a particularly interesting message. Dr. Morrison, I have Rita Henderson online too. She says it's urgent and concerns regulatory compliance. I looked at Harrison, who nodded encouragingly. Take it. I'm curious to hear what she has to say. Janet, thank God you answered. Rita's voice was completely different from yesterday's smugness. Now she sounded desperate and exhausted. I need your help. The federal agencies are saying we can't reopen the laboratory without a certified director, and the replacement candidates are saying it could take 6 to 8 weeks to complete the credentialing process. That sounds about right, I replied calmly. The background checks and verification processes are quite thorough. But we can't survive 8 weeks without laboratory revenue, Rita continued, her voice rising with panic. We're losing patients by the hour, and the physicians are threatening to sever their referral relationships permanently. I'm sorry to hear that, Rita, but I'm no longer a Brightal employee. Perhaps you should discuss these concerns with Patricia when she returns. She's flying back early, Rita said quickly. She'll be here this afternoon, and she wants to meet with you about returning. We can offer you a significant raise, additional vacation time, whatever you need. I appreciate the offer, but I've already committed to Wellspring Medical Group, I said, watching as another batch of laboratory orders arrived from former Brightall physicians. Even if I were interested, the damage to your certification status would require starting the entire approval process from scratch. You're saying there's no way to fix this quickly? Rita's voice was barely a whisper now. The regulations don't have emergency provisions for staffing decisions, I explained. You eliminated a federally required position, and there are consequences for that choice. After hanging up, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was certainly satisfaction in seeing Rita face the consequences of her arrogance, but I also felt genuine sadness for Patricia and the innocent staff members who were suffering because of one person's poor judgment. How did that go? Harrison asked, appearing with a cup of coffee and a wide smile. About as well as expected, I replied. Rita is beginning to understand that federal regulations don't bend for budget concerns. Well, their loss is definitely our gain, Harrison said. We're already ahead of our annual growth projections, and it's only been 24 hours. As I settled into my new office and began reviewing the day's quality control procedures, I couldn't help but appreciate the perfect irony of the situation. Rita's attempt to save money by eliminating my position had instead created the perfect storm that launched my career to new heights while potentially destroying everything she had tried to protect. 3 days later, Patricia Coleman returned from San Diego to find her medical practice in complete chaos. The scene that greeted her would have been comical if the consequences weren't so devastating for everyone involved. I learned the details from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, one of Brightall's primary care physicians, who had decided to establish her laboratory relationship with Wellspring. She called me that Thursday afternoon, still shaking her head in disbelief at what she had witnessed. Janet, you should have seen Patricia's face when she walked into the laboratory, Jennifer said. The entire diagnostic operation was shut down. No testing, no results, no revenue. Rita was standing there with a stack of regulatory violation notices, trying to explain why she thought firing you was a good idea. The confrontation had been swift and brutal. Patricia, normally composed and diplomatic, had apparently unleashed months of frustration on Rita in front of the entire laboratory staff. "What have you done, you fool?" Patricia had shouted, her voice echoing through the empty laboratory. "Do you have any idea what you've just destroyed?" Rita, according to Jennifer, had tried to defend her decision by pointing to the potential salary savings, but Patricia cut her off with devastating precision. "You eliminated the one person whose credentials kept us operational to save money." Patricia's voice had grown dangerously quiet. "That person, whose salary you thought was too high, was generating over $2 million in annual laboratory revenue." The financial reality was stark and undeniable. My position cost the clinic $120,000 annually in salary and benefits, but the laboratory operations I oversaw generated nearly 17% of Brightall's total revenue. Rita had eliminated a position that paid for itself more than 16 times over. Jennifer told me Rita actually tried to argue that they could hire a replacement quickly. Patricia apparently laughed, a bitter kind of laugh, and told her that the credentialing process alone would take 2 months, assuming they could find someone willing to join a clinic that had just demonstrated such spectacular regulatory incompetence. The immediate closure of Brightall's laboratory had created a domino effect that went far beyond lost revenue. Patient relationships that had taken years to build were severed overnight. Referring physicians, unable to trust a clinic that couldn't maintain basic operational compliance, were transferring their patients to other facilities. Insurance companies were demanding explanations for the sudden cessation of diagnostic services. By late October, just 2 weeks after I was let go, Rita's disastrous decision shook Memphis's medical community. Brightall Medical Center, once a trusted clinic serving over 8,000 patients, teetered on the edge of closure. Patricia, the head of the clinic, called an urgent board meeting to tackle the mess. Rumors swirled that she gave them 2 grim choices: pay huge federal fines for operating without proper certification or shut down the lab, slashing nearly 20% of the clinic's income. Meanwhile, things at Wellspring Medical Group were booming. I'd taken the helm of our lab operations, and we were growing fast. We brought on 3 new technicians and partnered with 12 new physicians to handle the flood of former Bridal patients. Janet, our October numbers are incredible, Harrison said during our weekly meeting. Lab revenue is up 68% from last month, and patient satisfaction is through the roof. The success felt like a dream after months of Rita's relentless criticism. At Wellspring, my expertise was valued. The lab staff trusted my guidance, and physicians called to thank me for our top-notch diagnostic services. Back at Bridal, Rita's reputation was in tatters. Her cost-cutting obsession had led to a regulatory disaster, making her a pariah in Memphis. Patricia fired her shortly after returning from San Diego, but the damage was done. The best part? Patients were getting better care. Wellspring's advanced equipment and expanded testing meant former Bridal patients were better off because of Rita's blunder. Her attempt to save money cost Bridal over $3 million and pushed the clinic into bankruptcy within 6 months. Rita never landed another healthcare management job. Her reputation was ruined by the costliest staffing mistake in Memphis medical history. Patricia tried to save the clinic, but ended up selling its assets to cover fines and patient claims. Standing in my corner office at Wellspring, I reviewed our year-end reports showing record growth and happy patients. Rita's arrogance had unexpectedly launched me into the best phase of my career. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is letting incompetent people face the consequences of their own bad choices.